This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Microsoft Excel 3. In this class, we'll be shifting gears a bit and talking about how we can make more sense of our data once we've entered it. So in Excel's 1 and 2, we got a lot of practice entering data, formatting data, and applying formulas to data. But now we're going to kind of see what Excel allows us to do once we have that data entered and those formulas entered. How can we make more sense of it? How can we get more information from it than what we see on the worksheet itself? So that's kind of what we're talking about today, and what we'll also be talking about in Excel 4. So today we're going to be talking about um, consolidating our data. Okay, if we have several separate worksheets, we can consolidate them into one, and then visualizing that data in charts and graphs, which can help us get more meaning from that data. All right, and also we're going to talk about working across multiple worksheets at the same time. We'll talk about that at the beginning, which you're going to see really expedites things for you. All right, excuse me. Um, And just a quick reminder that in this class we are using Excel 2019, which is one of the more recent versions of this program. As long as you have access to Excel 2007 or later, you'll see whatever you learn in this version can be easily applied to those other versions. All right, so in this class, we're going to do a bit of review. So we will review applying formulas to data ranges and formatting data ranges, just to make sure we have those fundamentals down. Okay. Once we cover that ground, we're then going to move on to selecting and editing multiple worksheets at the same time. And once we do that, okay, we're then going to we're going to take all those worksheets and create a consolidated summary, all right, which is a tool we find in our data tab in Excel. So essentially, remember that in Excel, in one workbook file, we can have several separate worksheets. Excel allows us to take all the data from those worksheets, consolidate them in some way, whether add them up, average them, whatever, and then create a consolidated summary. And that's what I'll be showing you a little bit later today, which is also going to show you kind of more generally how Excel is able to incorporate data from separate worksheets, other worksheets, or even other entire workbooks. So you don't always have to just stick with the data on one single worksheet. Now, once we have that consolidated summary, we're then going to display the data, or at least some of the data, through charts and graphs. All right, so basically the second half of class is going to be devoted to charts and graphs. And what you'll see is that inserting a chart is pretty easy. Formatting a chart might take a little bit of practice, so we will spend some time covering the various formatting options available to you in Excel. Now, real quick, why do we use charts and graphs? They help you visualize your data and identify patterns and relationships. So if we just have our regular hard data in front of us, that's great, but we can't really see trends or patterns. So for example, if I'm keeping track of attendance, which is something we'll be doing today, it's kind of hard to see what times of the year do I get the most attendance? What times of the year do I get the least amount of attendance? What classes are the most popular? So charts and graphs, because you're connecting those dots, you can see those trends and patterns much better. Okay, and charts and graphs, they can be formatted and manipulated to suit your preferences. So like I said, inserting a chart is pretty easy. Okay, but formatting it takes a little bit of practice, just realizing all the options that are out there. And last but not least, the chart type you select depends on the information conveyed in the data range you select. So you do not have to, if you're inserting a chart, it does not have to represent all of your data, okay? You can just do a subset of data, which is what we'll be doing later. And moreover, the specific type of chart that's used, okay, a line graph, a column chart, a pie chart, etc., that depends on the data you select. But what we're going to see is that Excel has a tool called recommended charts, which basically does that guesswork for us. And Excel will actually recommend the chart we should use for the data we select. Okay, it might just be one chart, it might be a few, and we can select from the options. So I'm going to put this away and go ahead and open up Excel. All right, so just a reminder that when we open up a Microsoft Office program, whether it's Excel, Word, PowerPoint, or Publisher, the first screen we come to is the Start screen, which contains on the left side a list of recent files that you've recently saved in that program. So in this case, we have a list of recent Excel workbooks. And as you can see, I have Excel 1 practice, Excel 2 practice from the previous 2 weeks, and then the Excel 3 practice workbook, which I'll be launching in just a second. On the right side, we have our template gallery, which contains all those built-in pre-designed specific types of, in this case, worksheets, which allow me to create that kind of worksheet very quickly. Okay, and remember, you can sort through the categories up here to reach various templates, and if you select one of those categories, you will then see on the next screen on the right side a vertical list, a scrollable list of all the categories, if you really want to explore all the templates Excel offers you. But again, today we're going to be working on an existing workbook, so I'm going to click on the back button here in the upper left-hand corner, and then make my way to the left side to that list of recent workbooks and select Excel 3 Practice Workbook. And this is the exact same workbook I sent you. I'm going to zoom in a bit here so we can see it better. All right, now as this is a level 3 class, and I did mention this last week, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time reviewing the work area in Excel, okay, the actual worksheet. By now in Excels 1 and 2, we have covered that quite extensively. So, but I will talk about it. I'll talk about the content of this file in just a few minutes. First, let's just review a couple other things. I do like to review the ribbon, okay, because that's very important. So above the work area, remember we have that menu that holds all the tools available to us in Excel. And when we're using Microsoft Office 2007 or later, we call this the ribbon. And the ribbon is organized by a series of tabs. So in the case of Excel 2019 here, I have a Home tab, Insert, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, View, and Help. And as I always say, ignore this Acrobat tab. This is something specific to my version of Excel. You likely don't have this on yours, so just pretend it's not there. Now, remember, when we click on a tab, we get a different set of tools for each tab. I'm making my way back to the Home tab. Okay, then each tab is further broken down by more specific categories, and those categories are listed at the bottom left to right. And remember, we call these groups. So in this example, in the Home tab, I have a clipboard group, a font group, alignment group, number, styles, cells, and editing. All right, so the groups are there to help you locate the specific tool you need within that tab. Also remember that in many of these groups, we have that additional access point, which is that triangle in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's called the arrow, in the bottom right-hand corner, we call that a dialog box launcher. So I'll use the number group as a quick example. If I click on that dialog box launcher, it will, just as the name says, launch a dialog box like this. And that dialog box will contain many of the same tools that are in that group, but instead of using icons, okay, it lays them out in a plain text format. So sometimes these dialog boxes are a bit easier to use, especially the number one here, which we've used before. Sometimes these dialog boxes also contain extra tools that are not in the ribbon at all. So sometimes we prefer to use these dialog boxes, and sometimes we have to use them. At the moment, I don't need it, so I'll go to the bottom right-hand corner and click on Cancel to close it. Now, also remember that in the upper left-hand corner of your ribbon is your Quick Access toolbar where I'm drawing with the red pen. You can add additional access points to your favorite tools to this toolbar so you can get to them faster. To do that, simply go to the very right, find the triangle with the line over it. That's the icon for more options. Click on it. It will give you a preliminary list of some tools that you can add, but if you want to get to all the tools in the ribbon, go down, click on More Commands. And from this dialog box, you can add whatever tools you need. You just have to add them one at a time. Select the tab in which that tool is found, select the specific tool from this list here, and then click Add. Repeat that process for each tool that you want to add to your quick access toolbar, and then click OK, and then they will be available up there in the upper left-hand corner. All right. Also, remember your formula bar. This is unique to Excel. The formula bar displays the contents of a cell that is selected on your sheet, which is especially important for formulas because remember, if we have a formula in a cell, okay, the cell itself is going to show us the answer the formula produces. So if we forget how the formula is constructed, or we're just trying to verify whether there's a formula there at all, we look in the formula bar and that's where we'll see it. Now, let's talk about the actual worksheet. So let's get into the actual project here. So it's pretty simple. We have some data here. And remember, in this case, we are utilizing the data range A1 through M4. So whenever we identify one cell, we identify the cell by the column letter followed by the row number. So this would be A1. However, when we identify a range, okay, we start with the cell in the upper left corner and end with the cell in the bottom right corner. So we would call this the A1 through M4 range. If we were to type that into Excel, it would be A1 colon M4. Now, we're using that cell range to arrange some pretty simple data here. So it looks like in row 1, our top row, we've set up essentially some labels, all right? They're kind of pulling a double duty in this case. I've talked about this before. Sometimes labels are just labels. They don't really have any unique value other than just identifying other values. All right, so for example, if we had employee ID number, that would probably just be a label. But in this case, they're kind of both, okay? So class and then the months of the year, they're kind of acting as labels to make sense of these numbers, but they could be values in their own right, okay? If we wanted to, you know, sort by month or something. I mean, there are, in other words, we can extract a little more meaning from some of those values other than just simply being labels. And then in column A, under class, we do have specific classes here, knitting, crocheting, and tapestry, which again are essentially pulling double duty. They are unique values in their own right, but they're helping us to make sense of the numbers in the range B2 through M4. Now, what are the numbers? Well, let's pretend that we own a studio and we offer classes in each of these skills or vocations, knitting, crocheting, and tapestry. So it looks like we're tracking monthly attendance for each class. In January, we had 19 people in knitting. In January, we had 18 people for crocheting, et cetera, et cetera. Now, more importantly, if you look down below under the work area, we have 3 sheet tabs set up, sheet 1, sheet 2, and sheet 3. So if I click on sheet 2, actually I want to do something real quick here. Good. If I click on sheet 2, you'll see pretty similar data. Sheet 3, same thing, very similar data. Okay. The only thing that's changing are the numbers in the range B2 through M4. All right, so it looks like what we're doing is we are tracking the monthly attendance for each class for 3 separate years. So we're dividing each year by its own sheet. Now, more importantly, each sheet is set up the same exact way. What do I mean by that? I mean that we are using the same cell range. I'm going back to sheet 1 now. We're using the same cell range for the same types of values in all 3 sheets. So A1 through M1 we're using that same range for the same exact thing in all 3 sheets, class and then the months of the year. Okay, we're using A1 through A2 through A4 for the classes in all 3 sheets, and then B2 through M4 for the attendance numbers, again in all 3 sheets. All right, and that's important, especially because in a few minutes we're going to talk about editing multiple sheets at the same time. And remember, if you have any questions during class, just use the chat feature in GoToMeeting. Click on the chat bubble, type in your question, and hit send. I'm going to take a quick sip of water, and then we're going to start editing this workbook. All right, so again, I'm back on sheet 1. I know I am because sheet 1 is in a green color. There's also an underline that indicates the active sheet. So the very first thing I should do before I add anything to the actual data set is I should probably rename these sheets to something more specific so I can remember what each one is, so I don't have to constantly try to remember what year is what. So I'm going to go ahead and rename these sheet tabs. We can do that in two very simple ways. I'll start with sheet 1. I could either right click it, and from the contextual menu here I can select rename, or you could just double click the sheet tab. The name will highlight, and you could just erase it with your backspace or delete key and type it in and then press enter. So I'm going to call this one 2019, and then I'll press enter to save that name. Now I'm going to go to sheet 2, double click on that one, call this one 2020, press enter. Sheet 3, double click it, call this one 2021, press enter to save the name, and then I'm going to make sure I click back onto 2019. Now remember, if you are doing this at the same time as me, you may not want to overwrite the file I sent you. So that way you still have the original files in case you want to do these exercises again. So you can save this as a separate copy, okay? So you can save all your changes as a separate copy by just doing save as again, as if you're saving it for the first time. All right, so just go to File, Save As, select your folder, all right, and then maybe call it Excel 3 Practice Workbook Updated or Revised, whatever you want to do to separate this from the one I sent you. And then you'll have two separate workbooks. All right, so we're on the 2019 sheet. The next thing I want to do is get a little more information. I want to know the yearly total for each class, the yearly attendance total for each class. So we're looking at the 2019 sheet. We see that each class and its associated data is arranged horizontally. Okay, each class, which means that I'm going to be adding up the values in the case of knitting B2 through M2 to give me a total, a yearly total for that particular class. So just to keep everything next to each other so we can see it on the same screen, I'm going to arrange this in column N. Remember, formulas, they don't have to go directly adjacent to the data they're referencing. They can go anywhere on your sheet, but just so I can keep everything on one screen so you can see it. And in case you want to print anything, we're going to keep it right next door in column N. Now, before we do that, before we set up the formula, we're going to set up a label in cell N1 that identifies the values underneath. And that label is just going to be called total. But still, I'm not going to do that yet. I want to get the same data. I want to apply the same formulas for each sheet. I want yearly totals for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And because each sheet is set up the same exact way, the same cell range, I can apply this to all three sheets at the same time, which saves me a lot of time and work. All right, so before I type anything in, the first thing I need to do is select all three sheets. Okay. How do I do that? I just go down to my sheet tabs. 2019 is already selected. I don't have to worry about that one. Now, if you've ever done this on a PC, This isn't just unique to Excel. We see this all over the place. When we need to select multiple things, all right, we sometimes need to use the Control or Shift key to select a batch or a group. Otherwise, if we just click, we undo the one before it. So 2019 is already selected. I'm going to hold down the Control key. While I'm holding it down, I'll click on 2020. I'm still holding it down. I'll click on 2021, and then I'll let go of the Control key. And now we can see that green underline is spanning 2019 through 2021, which means that all three sheets are currently selected. All right. Another way, just so you know, if in this case we're selecting all of the sheets, okay. So I also could use the Shift key, and when you use the Shift key, all you need to do is select your first item, your last item, and then it will select everything in between automatically. So if 2019 is already selected, I hold down Shift, I click on 2021, it will select 2020 as well because it's in between those two endpoints. All right, so if you use the Control key allows you to do non-consecutive items, but if you're doing a consecutive range, you could use the Shift key and it kind of speeds things up. So all three sheets are selected. Now I'm going to go to cell N1. I'm still on the 2019 sheet, and I'll type in total. I'll press enter to save that in there. Now we're going to insert our formula. Okay, so this one's pretty simple. We're just going to add up those values B2 through M2. All right. So in this case, we have 12 data values, so we don't want to have to enter each cell name one by one. So it would be much easier to just establish a cell range, which means that we can use a function. In this case, the AutoSum function. All right, now remember, when you're using a function, you could either select the function first and then select your cell range, or select your cell range first and then select the function. In this case, let's select the cell range first. So using my select cursor, the white plus sign, I'm going to select B2 through M2. Now I'm going to go up to my home tab, to the right to the editing group, and remember that AutoSum, this particular function, is right there in the ribbon because it's used so often. So click right on AutoSum, and in cell N2 we get our answer of 245. Now I'm going to apply that to the next two rows. So I'll click on cell N2, so that's my only active cell. And then I'm going to go to the bottom right corner, point at the little box, get my fill handle this time because we're talking about copying and pasting. There it is, the black plus sign. I click and drag down to cell N4, and we've applied that formula to the other two classes. So now I have 245, 220, and 194. All right. Now, because we selected all three sheets ahead of time, I'm going to click on the 2020 sheet, and you'll see that cell range N1 through N4 is already done. Same thing with 2021. All right, so I'll click again. Here's 2019, here's 2020, here's 2021. All right, so as you can see, you can enter data across multiple sheets at the same time, and you can apply formulas across multiple sheets at the same time. All right, you can also edit data. So if I wanted to change one of these values, if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to rename total in cell N1 to yearly total. All right, I could of course just select all three sheets and make that edit, and it will apply to all three at the same time. So as you can see, this really speeds things up considerably. Again, assuming that all the sheets are set up the same way. Now I'm going to click on the 2019 sheet again. Oh, and another thing too, this isn't super important necessarily, but it can be a little bit annoying if you're trying to go through all these different sheets and your zoom keeps changing, okay? that's another thing that you can actually control by selecting all your sheets ahead of time. So if you have, let's say, in this case, these 3 sheets, and you want them to all be zoomed in at 150, like mine are, you can select all 3 sheets, zoom it in to 150 or whatever it is, and then all 3 sheets will be that same zoom level. All right, and by the way, because they're all built the same way using the same cell range, when I originally created this workbook, all right, I built them all at the same time. In other words, what I did was I had an empty worksheet. Before I entered any data, I created 2 more sheets. So 3 empty sheets. I selected them all. I built one, which built all 3. Okay, and I'm talking about A1 through A4 and A1 through M1, because the actual unique data values, of course, those had to be entered in each sheet individually because those are unique to each year. So, and let's just practice this one more time. Let's say I want to, something we typically do in our classes, we like to format our labels in row 1. So let's do that for all 3 sheets. We're going to do it the same way. So I'm on the 2019 sheet. Before I do anything, before I make any formatting edits, I'm going to select all 3 sheets. So I'll go down to the bottom, I'll hold down the Shift key, I'll click on 2021 while I'm holding down Shift. That will select 2020 as well. So now all 3 sheets are selected. Now if I go up to A1, I'm going to select A1 through N1, so I'm going to include total. Remember the select cursor, not the fill handle. I'll go up to the Home tab to the font group. I'll click on the B for bold. I'll go to the fill color option, the paint bucket. I'll select a color. And then I'll go over to the alignment group and click on center alignment. And now because I selected all the sheets beforehand, if I go to 2020, okay, the same formatting options were applied to 2020 and 2021. So here's 2019, here's 2020, here's 2021. I'm going to click on 2019 again. So 2019 is currently my only active sheet. All right, now let's start talking about consolidated summaries. So let's say our supervisor or the owner of the studio, whomever, they come up to us and they say, I want to know the 3-year totals. For the past 3 years, what are the totals for each class? All right, and maybe the totals for each month. So basically what they want is they want us to take these 3 sheets and add everything up. And we could do that by creating a consolidated summary. All right, so I'm going to go to the data tab here in Excel. Now the data tab has a lot of great tools, including sort and filter. There's a sort and filter group. So this is another way to get to sort and filter other than your home tab, just so you know. But the one I'm focusing on for a second is the data tools group. Now, these icons, they might be arranged differently on your version of Excel. It's because of my screen resolution. They have a slightly different look and arrangement. Don't worry about it. The tools are the same. They're just arranged differently. That's all it is. Okay, so there's a lot of great tools here in the data tools group that kind of allow you to quickly sort of kind of manipulate your data, I guess, for lack of a better word. Okay, in some cases, get more information from your data. All right, so for example, text to columns. This is a great tool to know about. You could split a single column of text into multiple. Sometimes a problem I've seen before is that somebody has arranged a column with last names and first names in the same column. They want to create a last name column and a first name column separate. So you can use text to columns to separate them into two. Okay, that's just one of the tools in the data tools group. You have remove duplicates. It allows you to, it will look for duplicate values in your entire sheet and remove them if you need to do that. All right, data validation, other great tools. All right, if you've ever seen somebody that created a drop-down list with choices that you can only make one of these three choices, they do that through data validation. Okay, the one I'm going to focus on is consolidate. All right, so consolidate, like I said, it will summarize data from separate ranges, consolidating the results in a single output range. So the first thing to do is let's create a new blank worksheet into which we will place our consolidated summary because we want this in a separate sheet. So down below, remember the plus sign will give you a new sheet by your tabs. However, the new sheet will go to the right of the sheet that's currently selected. So if you want it all the way to the right after 2021, click on 2021 first and then click on the plus sign. If you didn't do that, it's not a big deal. You could just click and drag and move the tabs anyway to a different location. But just to save yourself the step, you could just do it that way. Now, I have a new tab called Sheet 1. Again, I'm going to rename it to something more specific, more unique. So I'll double click it. And I'm going to call this 3-year totals and then press enter to save that name. All right. So before we use the consolidate tool, let's talk about what we want to consolidate. All right, I'm back on the 2019 sheet. Really, we just want to consolidate everything, okay? Yes, we have the yearly totals here in column N, but we could also get a lot of good information from adding up the monthly totals for each class. For example, if I want to get an average, okay, for the knitting class. For the knitting class, what's the average number of attendees for January? I would get that by adding up all 3 Januaries, dividing them by 3. Okay, so there's a lot of good information I can get also from adding all those totals as well. So all this is to say that we want to consolidate all the data in all 3 sheets. So now let's go back to the 3-year total sheet. Now I'm going to go up to the data tab, go over to the data tools group and click on consolidate. Now when we click on it, we get this dialog box, and you will see this for other data tools, okay? Even some functions, sometimes more complicated functions, they give you a dialog box like this to kind of guide you through the step of building that Excel syntax so it's built correctly, okay? So let's look at what it's asking us to specify. First, the function. We can consolidate by different mathematical functions. Doesn't have to be adding, doesn't have to be sum. But in this case, we do want to add, so we're going to leave it at sum. Next, it asks us for reference, and this is asking us for the cells that we want to reference to build this consolidated summary. So we're just going to let Excel help us build it. So to the right of the reference box, you will see this up arrow, okay? That will temporarily collapse the dialog box like this. And you'll see the select cursor. And what you do now is you select the cells that you want to reference in the consolidation. So I'll click on the 2019 sheet and I'm going to select all of my data, A1 through N4. Remember that total column at the end. Notice a dashed line around it. Also notice if you look in that consolidate reference box, you can kind of make sense of what it's doing. It's building a formula. It's using a formula to build a consolidation. All right, it's saying the 2019 sheet A1 through N4. So now that I've selected the cell references, I will go to the right to that same arrow. Now it's a down arrow. Click on it to open the consolidate dialog box back up like this. And then I just need to manually add it to the all references box here. So I'll click on add. All right, now I want to select the data from the other two sheets. Now, a quick, make sure you don't click on anything else at this point, especially on the sheet. Kind of a quicker way to do this, you can collapse the box again, go to 2020, do the same thing, but because we are matching the same exact cell range, A1 through N4, okay, all I have to do is go down and click on the 2020 tab. And if you look in the reference box, it just updated it to 2020 A1 through N4. So now I click add. Again, 2021 is the same cell range, A1 through N4. So I go down, I click on the tab, it updates it to 2021, A1 through N4. I click add here. And now all three data ranges are in the all references box. Okay, and we don't want to click OK yet. Down here where it says use labels in, this is very important. Top row, left column, because remember, we always talk about the importance of labels. They're important for you to make sense of your data or somebody else to make sense of the data, but they're also important for Excel to kind of, sometimes we want Excel to treat them as labels. So we're going to check off both boxes, top row and left column. Okay, and before I click OK, I just want to tell you that the steps we just took here are the same kinds of steps you would use for other functions and other tools that allow you to incorporate data from other sheets, or in some cases, other workbooks. Okay. All right. Excel will often kind of guide you through the process. You use your select cursor, as we saw, to select other sheets, select ranges, and then input them into the dialog box. All right, so the steps we just took are not unique to Consolidate. You'll see them for other types of tools. All right, so I'm going to click OK now, finally. And here's our consolidated summary. Let me zoom in on this one. I'll go up to 150. All right, now it's going to look different. You'll notice cell A1 is blank. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's just focus on the actual summary first. So, for example, if we look at N1 or N2 through N4, excuse me, here. Okay, what did it do? It just took N2 from all three sheets, added them up together to give us a grand total here. N3, it took the N3 value from 2019, 2020, 2021 to give us 744. All right, and then the same down underneath with 666 from, it's getting that total from the three separate sheets. And it did the same thing to the monthly totals. So B2 from all three sheets, all right, the values in the B2 cell from all three sheets where they were added together to give us 64, et cetera, et cetera. All right, now, first of all, we don't have the formatting, the labels, the way we formatted that row one. That's okay. That's because this isn't it's not really a copy and paste tool. All right, it's best not to think of this as copy and paste. We're using a function, as we saw before, to build this. So it's not a simple copy and paste. Now, because it's not a simple copy and paste, that was why we had to check off those two boxes, top row and first column, or left column, excuse me. Okay, because the consolidation, in this case, we use the sum function, which only works with numerical values. Okay, so by checking off the two boxes to indicate that these are labels, okay, Excel did in fact copy and paste these ranges. Okay, so in other words, it didn't they were left out of the function, but it did copy and paste them because we told Excel that those are labels, we need those. But it only did that because we checked off the 2 boxes, use labels in the top row, use labels in the left column. Now, if you look at A1, the value or the label class was not carried over. Why not? Because there's no numerical data associated with that value. It's not a label for any of this. All right, so it was left out. So in cell A1, I'm just going to type in class manually, and there it is. We fixed it. No big deal. All right. Last but not least, some of these values, they're not fitting into the current width of their respective columns. I'm looking at crocheting, for example, in cell A3, September in J1. Okay, so let's fix those. In Excel 2, we did the auto fit. Remember, when you bring your mouse pointer up between 2 column letters, you'll get the 2-way arrow like so. And when you double click, in this case, it will auto fit the column to the left of that 2-way arrow. So it's just the right size, not too wide, not too narrow. But we can apply auto fit to multiple columns at the same time, which might speed things up for us because we have a handful of columns that need this. So instead of doing it one by one, what I'm going to do is I will select the triangle here in the upper left-hand corner of the sheet. To the left of the A, right above the 1. If I click on that, it will select every column, every row in the sheet. So if I auto fit 1, okay, they're all grouped together in one selection. So if I auto fit 1, it's going to auto fit them all. So if I just go between A and B and double click, it doesn't really matter where you go. Just double click between any 2 columns and it will auto fit them all. Some of them it's going to make more narrow, so it's not wasting space. And then some of them it will open them up. So everything fits. All right. So now we have our consolidated summary. All right, we're moving right along here. This is great. So, oh, and real quick, I'll just show you since we are moving right along, I'll show you real quick in case you were wondering in that consolidate box. All right, the browse button. That's how you can actually incorporate data from other workbooks. So you can browse for them in your folders in your computer. And down here where it says create links to source data, you can actually it will. I don't want to click on it because then I'll have to create a new summary, but essentially it will add the source data for that from all 3 sheets. So in other words, you'll see all the B2s from all 3 sheets. Okay, between class and knitting here. So you can see essentially the actual values that add up to 64. And then we'll see that again, cell B3. It will have all the individual B3s from each sheet plus the total here. So you can see, so everything's in one place, not just the summary itself, but the source data. So it's all in one place. And then those intervening rows it creates, you can collapse them or expand them, hide them or unhide them. All right, but like I said, I don't want to do that. It's going to get things a little bit, I don't want to get too far off track. So I'm just going to, I encourage you to check that out when you're practicing, how that works. All right, so now we have these 3-year totals, great. So now our supervisor comes back, they say this looks good, I'm presenting this. I want to convert this to a chart. I kind of want to see, you know, I want to get a better idea visually of how this looks. What's the most popular, maybe how things have changed, etc. So let's get the charts and graphs. So what our supervisor wants, in this case, they just want the 3-year yearly totals per class. In other words, right now they're not concerned with the monthly totals, but they do want the yearly totals, or the 3-year totals, excuse me, per class, which we would find in column N, N2 through N4. So really this is kind of all they want. All right, now when we insert charts and graphs, first of all, we go to the Insert tab. If you've taken other Office classes with me before, I've talked about using objects like pictures, text boxes, tables. All right, charts and graphs are another kind of object. All right, we can insert them on top of our work area. We can move them around, we can resize them, we can format them. So and objects, no matter what Office program you're using, objects, again, like charts, graphs, pictures, tables, they're always in the Insert tab. So we're in the Insert tab, and we do see a charts group right here with all the different charts we can use. Now, before we do that, you need to select the data you want to display as a chart first before you select the chart. Because remember, the chart type depends on the data you select, which means you have to select the data first. So we said that the supervisor wants the 3-year totals per class, which would be N1 through N4. All right, so we select it. Remember, you don't use the fill handle, you use your select cursor. N1 through N4, great. Are we done? No. Why not? Well, because with this data, we have no idea what class is which. So we need to select a little more to make sense of this, because remember the importance of labels. So we need to also select A1 through A4 all the way to the left. Okay, but we have 2 non-adjacent columns or 2 non-adjacent ranges, so I can't just select it because it's going to undo the one before it. So once again, we need to use our control key on the keyboard. Remember I said that on a PC, if you're selecting, in many cases, non-consecutive items, you need to use the control key. So I'll select A1 through A4 normally, again with the select cursor, big white plus sign, and then I'm going to hold down the control key, and while holding down control, I'll select N1 through N4. And now those 2 non-adjacent ranges are selected. Now I'm going to go up to the charts group, and I still need to know what kind of chart would best suit this particular subset of data. So I'll let Excel tell me. I'll click on recommended charts right here. And it recommends 4 different kinds of charts that I could use: cluster column, pie chart, cluster bar, funnel. All right, let's say I want to use the pie chart. Now, there are different variants for each chart. So for example, pie charts. The default pie chart will be 2-dimensional like this, but there is a 3D pie. So now that I know that I'm going to use a pie chart and that will work for my data, I'm going to click on this tab up here that says All Charts. So on the left, I'll select pie. And then up here, we have those variants. The second one from the left is 3D pie. I'll click that one, and then I'll click OK down here at the bottom. And there's my chart. Now, as I mentioned, objects like this, it's on top of the work area. It's not built into it, which means we can move it around, we can resize it, and we can also format it in many, many, many ways. So let's just talk about moving and resizing real quick. If you look at the selection box around the chart, you'll see those little dots in the corners and in the center of the left, right, bottom, or top and bottom, excuse me. All right, those are called sizing handles or resize handles. If you point at any of those dots, any of those handles, you will get a two-way arrow. If you click and drag with that two-way arrow in any particular direction, you can resize the object if needed. All right, but I'm gonna click undo a couple times to go back to the way it was. Now, if you point between the handles, you will get a four-way arrow. If you click and drag with the four-way arrow, you can move the object to a new location, which is what I'm going to do so I can see the data behind it. So I'll just put it right underneath. Right here is fine. Now I'll just scroll down a little bit so I can see the whole chart. And if at any time I need to look at my data, I could just scroll up and it's right there. No big deal. All right, now the other thing about objects, and again, we talked about this in Word 3 this morning, for example, when we're working with objects like this, we will always get a contextual menu in our ribbon. The contextual menu contains tools and commands that are specific to that kind of object, whether it's a table, a chart, text box, picture, etc. So if you look up in the ribbon, we do have, in fact, a menu called Chart Tools. And in that Chart Tools menu are two tabs, Design and Format. And remember, this is called a contextual menu because if I leave the object, if I click outside of the chart, back onto my worksheet, the menu goes away. If I click on the chart again to select it, the menu comes back. Now, as I said, formatting, there are many, there's like a million ways to format a chart, okay? And, you know, don't worry, we're not gonna go through all of them. What I really wanna show you is just how to understand the various formatting options available, kind of understanding where to go for specific types of formatting changes, okay? Now, what I'd like to do real quick, I'm gonna zoom in so you can see this better. I'll zoom in very closely. If I point at different parts of this chart, you'll see a little tag pop up next to my mouse pointer. This says chart title. This says chart area. Down here says plot area. This blue slice says series total, point knitting, value 819. If I scroll down, if I point at this, it says legend entry 1, 2, 3. So these little tags, these are called chart elements. All right, and essentially when you're formatting a chart, you are formatting each element. You might want to format all of them or just a few of them. Okay, now let me zoom back out, back to 150. Okay, now let's go up to the menu for a minute here. Okay, under Chart Tools, Design tab, Format tab. Now the Design tab, generally speaking, whenever you see Design in Microsoft Office, you're usually going to find kind of built-in kind of wholesale ways of changing the design of something, whether it's like in Microsoft Word, the look of your whole page, or in this case, the look of the chart. So in other words, I can overhaul the entire design. I can use one of these chart styles, okay, which are just different designs. So all the elements that make up that one cohesive design, okay, they're all different in these different styles. So if I like one of these, I could use one of them, okay, or we can format the elements ourselves, which is what we're going to do. Okay, so the Design tab, think of the options in the Design tab as ways to change the overall design of the chart, kind of across the board, quickly. All right, not just the way it looks. For example, in the data group here, you can switch your rows and columns in the chart so they're portrayed differently or displayed differently. You can also select other data from your data range above. If you change your mind, you want to add more or change it, you can do that. Again, because in this case, you're changing the overall design of the chart. You can also change the chart type. If you're not happy with the pie chart, you can still change it to something else. Again, changing the whole thing. And you can move the entire chart to a different location if you want, whether it's in this workbook or to a new workbook. Now, all the way to the left, you'll see the chart layouts group, and there you see add chart element. And I'm going to click on that for 1 second because this is important. So remember, one chart is made up of various separate elements. Furthermore, don't always assume that all the elements are currently turned on or added to your chart. So in this case, I see 3 elements that are available under add chart element: chart title, data labels, legend. Now the ones that are grayed out, these are kind of extra things that you can add from other places in your ribbon. So we didn't add them to this chart, so they're just not available. So we don't need to worry about those. The other 3, however, these are available to us: chart title, data labels, legend. Now chart title, if I look at it, on the right side it says above chart. That's the one that's selected. So that tells me 2 things. This element has been added to the chart, and it tells me where it's located, above chart. So there's the title right there where it says total. Okay, if I go to legend, same thing. It tells me it's been added and that it's located at the bottom because bottom is selected. If I go to data labels, however, it just says none. So this element has not yet been added to the chart. I don't have to add it, but this way I know it's available to me if I do want to add it. Okay, now, again, we're talking about the chart as a whole in the design tab. If I need to format individual elements, then I go to the format tab, which I'm clicking on right now. Okay, now a lot of the tools in the format tab here, we've seen them before. For example, in Word 3 this morning, shape styles, word art styles. Okay, a lot of these are more cosmetic and you don't get the full suite of options in the ribbon. So we're going to be using a different menu. We'll come to that in a few minutes. But again, we have basically a number of ways to format one particular element in your chart. Now, all the way to the left in the format tab, we have current selection. So this is one way you could select the element you want to format and then use the tools here to format it. So in the current selection group, we see the drop down and we see a few elements there: chart area, chart title, legend, plot area, series total. So I can select one of these and then format it accordingly. Now you might be asking yourself, well, before we didn't see all these elements in the design tab. That's because some of these, chart area, plot area, and series in this case, these are kind of universal elements. So they're going to be part of every chart, no matter what. You can't add them, you can't take them away. Okay, and I should also mention too that not all charts will have the same elements. I forgot to mention that. Some are going to have more. The pie chart's actually kind of limited. That's why I like to start with this. All right, other charts have more elements. And again, you just have to see whether they've been added already to the default design of the chart or whether you have to add them yourself. And then you format each element according to your preferences. So if you go to the chart itself, so I'm going to come down here to the chart now. I'm leaving the ribbon. You'll also see this little toolbar here. If I can just kind of keep your eye on that section right there. All right, there's that toolbar. The plus sign gives you the same add chart elements tool we saw in the design tab. So this is another perhaps faster way to do the same thing. See what elements are, which ones are currently turned on, which ones are turned off. And we'll probably be using that throughout because it's, again, faster than going up to the design tab. Also, if you want to back to formatting elements, okay, sometimes a faster way to select an element to format rather than using this current selection group is to just select the element itself on the actual chart. So for example, if I want to format the chart title, I can just click on the chart title, or more to the point, I can double click on that element and look at the right side of the screen. We get a special format pane. In this case, it says format chart title. All right, so this is what I was talking about before when I said that we're not really going to be using these formatting options up here. We're going to be using the format pane because you get more options essentially, and I think it's a bit more intuitive in its design. Excuse me. All right, so let's do some formatting exercises to get us comfortable using the formatting pane on the right and kind of understanding how we go from the chart to the format pane back and forth. And I should also mention that some things you can just do directly. Like if I want to change the title itself from total to something different, I could just type right into that box. Okay, I don't have to use a format pane for something like that. And one more thing I should mention is that you can still use basic formatting commands from your home tab. Things like font size, left, center, right alignment. Okay, you could still use those. You don't have to just use the format pane on the right. All right, and as we do these exercises, this format pane on the right will make more sense to you in terms of how everything's broken down. So first thing I'd like to do is let's just give this a different title. Again, this one's very simple. I want to change it from total. I want it to say 3-year totals per class. So all I have to do in this case, just double click. You might have to actually give it one single click and then give it a single click, wait a second, give it another click, and then you'll be inside of that particular element. And you'll notice that each element is basically its own little text box, or each element is kind of like its own object in and of its own right, in its own right. Okay. Notice the little box around it. So in this case, I'll just delete total and I'll just type in 3-year totals per class. Pretty simple. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to, what should we do first here? I'm just looking real quick. Yeah, I want to give the text box, okay, the box around the chart title, I want to give it a color. Okay, so let's go to the format pane on the right where we see format chart title. If you don't see the format pane, remember, just double click on that element itself, the actual title, and you'll see it pop up on the right. Sorry if I'm off camera, I'm kind of, there we go. So on the right side, we see format chart title, and then you see two categories, title options and text options. All right, and you will see these same two categories for many elements. If any element that is able to accommodate text will have a text options category. Now, anything under title options, you'll see under title options, we get kind of subcategories, okay, more specific. These 3 different icons. So again, let me just be more clear. Title options, 3 subcategories. And you'll see that this one is fill and line, this one is effects, this one is size and properties. So depending on what we need to do, we need to consult the proper menu or subcategory. So the first category, whenever you go to this format pane for any element, the first category is basically it's going to allow you to format the object itself, the element as an object, if that makes sense. So if I want to, for example, fill in that rectangle with a color, that would be under title options because I'm dealing with it as an object, okay, a rectangle. Remember, objects can be moved, they can be resized. Oh, let me put it back. Now, if I want to format the text, if I want to change the color of the font, okay, I would then go to text options, and we get text fill, an outline, text effects, text box. This text box is always a bit confusing to me, but the way it's labeled, but it's essentially if you wanted to change the way the text was aligned in the box, vertically or horizontally, you can, I'm sorry, vertically, for example, you would do that here under text options, text box, because in that case, it's impacting the text itself. All right, so again, what do we want to do? We want to fill in the object, the chart title object, with a color. So I'm going to go to title options. I'm going to select the fill in line menu, which is the paint bucket. From this expandable collapsible menu, I'll select fill. I'll go to solid fill, and then I'll choose a color from here. One that's not used yet, maybe green. Okay. You could do other types of fills. You could do pictures, patterns, gradient, but we're just going to stick with a simple solid color fill. And transparency, if you're not familiar, kind of, it will brighten sort of, or fade that particular color or whatever it is. So it will be, you can kind of fade it into the background more. In fact, does it use, yeah. As you increase transparency, it just becomes more subtle, or it's not so in your face. But we don't need to use that here. I just wanted to remind you of what that is in case you're curious. So we filled it in with a color, great. All right, if we wanted to give it a border, we can go to border here. Okay, give it a solid line, a different color. If we wanted to give it some kind of shadow effect, we would go to title options, effects. Okay, but we're just gonna keep this simple. Now, the text, it's kind of a gray color. Maybe I wanna just make it black so it's a bit easier to read. So now I'll go to text options, and I'll go to text fill and outline, the first subcategory. Down here, I'll click on text fill. I'll go to solid fill, go to the color palette, and select the black at the top row there. And now it's a little easier to read. And remember, you can use tools from your basic home tab. You can change the font, font size, whatever it is you want to do. All right, now let's talk about another element. Oops. The next thing I'd like to do is I want some data labels. So the one thing this chart is missing are some nice labels. So if I want to know the value of this blue slice, the numerical value, I have to point at it and look at the tag, which doesn't really help if we want to print it out, or even if we just want to show it up on a projector so people can look at it. We want the label to be on the chart itself. So this is an element called data labels, and in this case, we need to essentially turn it on or add it. So before we can format data labels, we need to add them. So let's go to our little toolbar here to the plus sign. Click on it. Check off the box for data labels. And then we could just kind of, that flyout menu stays open until you just click outside of it. Actually, no, I always forget this somehow. You have to actually click on the plus sign again to close that little flyout menu. There we go. So now that we have data labels, they're there. I have the numerical values, but I can still format them. All right, I want to maybe change the way they look and maybe even add some data. So if I just double click on any of them, it will select all three as a group. And on the right side, we get a format data labels pane like you see here. All right, and this is good to note whenever one element, and this is a good way to kind of think about the difference between elements and objects, because I've been saying that we need to think of this chart title element as an object as well. Okay, so here we go again. When you have one element, in this case data labels is the element, when that element is made up of more than one object, like we have 3, okay, when we select one, we select them all as a group. It is possible to choose just one object from that element group. We'll come to that in a little bit. So as you saw, I double clicked on one, it selected all 3. And again, we have the format data labels pane on the right. So let's go over and see what we have. Label options, remember I told you the first category there will be specific to the element itself. This is label options. And then to the right, because we can put text into this these objects, we have text options as well. Now I'm staying under label options for a second, and we see the same initial 3 subcategories we saw before: fill in line, effects, size, and properties. Okay, but there's a 4th one we did not see before. This one here that looks like a little bar graph, and that is again called label options. Okay, I'm going to click on this one. All right, whenever you see this particular icon in the format pane, this essentially allows you to add, to think of it as changing the way the data itself is presented. Okay, so a lot of things are kind of purely cosmetic. We're just changing the way they look. But when we're dealing with an element that has data in it, like we do right now, we sometimes want to change the way that data is displayed. Maybe we want to have percentages, for example. All right, maybe we want to have the class names next to each label. So whenever you see this icon whenever you see this icon in a format pane, just remember it's because you're dealing with actual data in that element, and you can change the way the data is presented. So let's say the supervisor wants the numerical values like we see here, but also percentages. So if I click on this subcategory, label options, and then I'll expand label options here, we see label contains. So I'll check off the box for percentage. So now we can see, all right. And actually, let me add one more thing. All right, the class names, knitting, crocheting, tapestry, maybe I want them on the actual label. So I'll check off category name. All right, so now we can see that of all attendees, 37% of total attendees from the past 3 years, okay, attended the knitting class. All right, so we've added some additional information to those data labels. Perfect. Now it's kind of hard to read them. So remember, each of these is its own object. So what can I do? I could probably fill in each object with a nice white background to set it apart from the pie chart behind it. So now in my format pane on the right, I go to the fill in line subcategory under label options. I go to solid fill. I go down to color and I'll select white, the very first one. And if I want the font in those objects to be black instead of that gray color, we're talking about the text, so I have to go to text options. All right, go to text fill and outline, go to text fill, select solid fill, and I'll change it to black. Last but not least, remember objects, they can be moved and resized. So I can just move these if I want to kind of put them into their respective slices better. Just click, hold, and drag with that four-way arrow and you can move them around. Oops. Now, because we have the category names in each label, it kind of removes the need for the legend below. So that's just unnecessary. So maybe I'll just get rid of it. So in this case, we're not formatting an element. We're just, as I say, we're just turning it off. So if I select that element on my chart, okay, you don't have to double click because we're not formatting, just select it. And basically a few ways of doing this. You can go to the plus sign, that little mini toolbar, and just uncheck the box for legend to turn it off. You can do it from your design tab, or just select the element on your chart, press delete on your keyboard like this, and now it's removed. But we could always add it back by just going back to the plus sign and turning it back on. All right, now there's another element here called the plot area. All right, which is kind of, think of it as the base of your chart. And again, you'll see this for other types of charts, not just pie charts. It's the base of the chart. The chart area is back here, and that's just kind of what's filling in that entire object that we see. All right, this entire rectangle. The chart area is kind of filling that in, but the space immediately around your chart, that's your plot area, and that's the base or the foundation of the chart. So, for example, let's say the supervisor wants the most popular class to be front and center. So they basically want knitting to be where crocheting is. So what we could do is we can, let me close this, we can rotate the pie chart. All right. Now, you would think, what do we want to rotate? We want to rotate the pie chart. So I'm going to select the chart itself, the actual pie, but the pie chart is the data. Okay, the pie chart is the hard data, just representing it in by slice. So what we want to rotate is the plot area. It's kind of like a carousel. All right, I always tell people, just picture a pie sitting on top of a plate. There's one slice taken out. You're sitting across. You want to take out a slice next to that one. So the person across from you, they're not going to pick up the pie and turn it around. They're going to pick up the plate and turn the plate around. Same idea here. We're going to turn around the plot area, which will, in effect, turn around the pie. So, excuse me, I will double click on the plot area. On the right, I got format plot area. Now, we don't get text options because we can't type into a plot area. So this one's pretty simple. We just get one category, which is plot area options, and only two subcategories, fill in line and effects. All right, we're not talking about filling it in with a color or pattern. We're not talking about giving it an outline. We want to do something a bit more nuanced. So that's probably going to be an effect. So I'm going to click on the effect subcategory, and we do see down there at the bottom 3D rotation. All right, we see X rotation, Y rotation. Let's think about which one that is, which one we want to rotate. We want to rotate the classes, right? If we look at our original data set, the classes are arranged horizontally across rows. And if you know spreadsheets, all right, or graphs, you'll know that the x-axis is the horizontal, the y-axis is the vertical. So we want to go to X rotation. And I'm just going to click on this up arrow, and as I click it, it will start to rotate step by step until knitting is front and center. That looks good, 110 degrees. Now by doing that, it also kind of pushed the labels to the side. So if I want to put them back on, I just go to the labels, click and drag and put them back on. All right. Now, last but not least, this is, let's do one more thing that's kind of specific to pie charts. I want to draw a little more emphasis to that one class, knitting. All right, I really want to that to be the focus of my next discussion, or the supervisor does. Let me close this format pane for now. So this, you've probably seen this with pie charts before. Sometimes when you want to focus on a specific slice of the pie, you separate it from the others, and we call that exploding the pie, okay? So I want to take the blue slice and separate it from the other two. So a couple things to consider here. First of all, in this case, we do want to select the actual pie because we're talking about kind of relocating the data, okay, moving it away from the other data. We want to focus on a specific set of data right now. So we do need to select the data. And by that, I mean we need to select the slice, which represents the data. Another thing, though, is that, remember, in this case, this is an example of an element with more than one object. We have one element called series, okay, data series, but it's represented by 3 individual slices, 3 objects, which means if I select one, it's going to select all 3, but we only want to explode the blue slice. Okay, so and I'll show you what I mean. So if I double click onto the blue slice, on the right side, notice how it says format data series. That means it's grabbing all 3 slices. If I want to isolate and only select one object from that element, if I click on it and then click on it again, just kind of give it a second and then click on it again, the blue slice, only that one is selected. Okay, again, it's not a double click, single click, wait a second or two, single click again, and then only the blue slice is selected. Now, if I double click on the blue slice, notice it says format data point instead of data series. All right. Again, we can't type text into a slice, so there's no text options. We see fill in line, we see effects, and there's that graph icon again, because remember what I told you, whenever we're dealing with an element that contains data, we're going to get this icon, this menu, that allows us to change the way that data is presented. So that's probably what I need, because we're not talking about changing the color. Okay, we're talking about the way the data is being shown to us. So I'm going to click on that icon, which is called series options. If this isn't expanded, just click on series options to expand it. And then we see right here, point explosion. So if I increase that, it will separate the blue slice from the others. Now I'm going to put it back to 0 for a second. And just to show you, I showed you the hard way first on purpose, because I just want you to really understand how to navigate through this format pane and really understand what that graph icon means when you see it. But you can also accomplish the same goal by isolating that blue slice, which I just did with 2 single clicks, and then just click and drag it away from the other 2, and there it is. Because remember I told you there are several things we can do by just going to the chart itself and clicking and dragging or retyping, whatever it is. And if I need to relocate the data labels, I can. Now they might be too big, but you can do, one thing I could do is I can select all 3 labels as a group. I can go to the home tab, go to the font group, maybe if I make the text the font a little smaller, that will make the label smaller, and then I can just put them onto their respective slices like this. All right, I'm going to close that format pane. And there is my pie chart. And we'll just say that that is done. If you want to give your chart area background, remember you could just double click. And the chart area, I always forget to point this out. This particular element, you'll see text options, which is kind of confusing. All right, basically it will just grab all of the text in your whole chart across the board, regardless of element. Okay, but all I want to do right now is just give my chart area a background color. So I'll go to Format Chart Area, Chart Options, Fill and Line. I'll go to Solid Fill. And what has been used yet? Yellow. I'll do like a light yellow color, like this. And that's also impacting the plot area. You can make the plot area a separate color if you want, but I'll just leave it alone. All right, now if you'd like, let's do another chart to really just to bring it all home. All right, so we definitely understand how this is working. Oh, and I should also mention charts, they are linked to their data sets, which means that if I change something, it will be reflected in the chart. It will be synced. I don't have to do anything manually. So for example, if I was to change this 819 to a 999, notice it's represented or reflected in the chart. All right, let me just undo to go back to what it was. All right, if you want, let's do another one. This time we want the monthly totals. Okay, the monthly totals for the past 3 years. Okay. Just thinking how I'm going to phrase that. That's kind of a confusing one. But essentially, in this case, we want the monthly data. We don't want anything from column N. So remember, when we insert a table, or I'm sorry, when we insert a chart, the first thing we need to do is select the data that we want in that chart. So I'll go to A1 with my select cursor. I'll select A1 through M4. So I'll go up to my Insert tab, and I'll go to the Charts group and select Recommended Charts. Notice how this time it does not give you a pie chart, because a pie chart is really for a specific period of time, like a snapshot. Okay, but in this case, we're talking about several months. Things have changed a lot over time. A pie chart doesn't really grab that well. So it's going to give us some different options. All right, so on the left there, I see line chart, clustered column, stacked area, stacked column, 100% stacked column. Let's say I want to go with the clustered column here. Okay, now again, remember, we have variants on each of these charts. If I want a three-dimensional one, I have to go to the All Charts tab. So now that I know clustered column will work, I'll go to All Charts. All right, column is already selected on the left. Up here, I'll go to the variants and I'll select 3D clustered column, and then I'll click OK. And there's my chart. Now, if I want to move that, remember, you just go to the outline of the chart itself, find your four-way arrow, click, hold, and drag to move it to a different place. And here's my clustered column. I'll move it over a little more so we can get that other one out of the way for now. There we go. All right, so remember, if I want to, first thing I might want to do is just see the elements that are available for this kind of chart. So I can go to the plus sign and see what's turned on and what is not turned on, what's turned off. And there's everything. And you'll see different elements here than you saw for the pie chart because, as I said, each chart has its own set of elements because not all charts are built the same, obviously. All right, but I can always come back to that. First, let me change the title. I'll double click on it. I'll erase it. And I'll call this might sound a little confusing, but I'm going to call it 3-year totals per class per month. Or maybe 3-year class totals per month. Maybe that makes a little more sense. However you want to word that is fine. Maybe I'll change that. 3-year class totals per month. All right, so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, the grid lines are nice. Okay, the grid lines are these back here, of course. Okay, what each column is, you know, that's how you tell the value for each column. Okay, we have the grid lines with their associated intervals on the left. But if I want to be a little more precise, maybe I can add something to this to give me the exact values. So if I go to the Add Chart Element button here in my toolbar, there's an element called Data Table, which I think is pretty cool. I'll click on it, and you'll see that underneath each clustered set, each column set, we get the actual data from the data range above. Okay, so we get the hard data, but we can also look at the columns, which helps us to see how things have changed over time. visually I could just see, okay, things seem to look like they pick up in the spring, and then they start to fall back down in the summer, and then in the fall we're back to getting more attendance. So that's how, like I said before, charts visually, they kind of help us see trends, patterns, relationships. Okay, the grid lines, they're a little bit faded. Maybe I want to make them a bit more pronounced so I can see them better. So I'll just double click on any of the grid lines. And on the right side, I get Format Major Grid Lines. All right, Major Grid Line options. Only get 2 subcategories, fill and line effects. Pretty simple. All right, under line, I'll go to solid line and just change it to maybe black, like this. I could even change the width of the lines. If I want it to be thicker or thinner, I could do that. I could change the way the line looks. Okay, several options are here. All right, if I want to change the intervals on the left, all right, I want it to be in 5s instead of 10s. Well, I could double click on that element. I get Format Axis on the right. Now we're talking about changing the way the data is presented. So we're not talking about changing the color or something cosmetic. So we're probably going to go to Format Axis, Axis Options, and then there's the graph icon. We click on it. I go to Axis Options, and we see here bounds and units. Bounds is essentially the range of that axis, 0 to 90. You can make it 0 to 100, 0 to 80, whatever. And then we have units, okay? Increments of 10. 2 is the smallest you could do, I guess. So I can change it from 10 to 5. I'll just press enter, and now look at my grid lines. I have several more grid lines because now it's in increments of 5. Okay, it's a little, it could be a little bit tricky because now the numbers are too big to fit into the object. Remember, the element is in an object. But just to show you that that can be accomplished, maybe I could just change the font size, something much smaller. It probably would have to be really small. I could also resize it, but I think you get the idea. In fact, I'm going to change it back. Maybe I decide, okay, 5 doesn't really work. Let's make it 10s again. So I'll double click on the axis on the left, go to the axis options here, change it back to 10, major. Or you can click on reset to go back to what it was. Okay, and one more thing just to remind you, remember that some elements are represented by more than one object. So the columns are a great example. Okay, so by selecting, so the blue columns, they are knitting. They refer to knitting, as you can see by the legend down here. Okay, so if I select one blue column, oops, there we go. I wasn't quite grabbing it. It's going to select all of them, all the blue columns, all the knitting columns. But if for some reason this one in September, all right, this one we did especially well, I want to emphasize just that one month for that one class, or that one class for that one month. So if I give it one single click, wait a second, another single click, now only that one blue column is selected. Notice it says Format Data Point instead of Format Data Series on the right here. Now I can go to Fill and Line, Solid Fill, and I could probably just use that color. That kind of works. White doesn't work. maybe black works pretty well to really emphasize that one. Okay, I can add an axis title on the left here. Which could say maybe number of attendees. Double click into it. Now this is, as you can see, it's written vertically, which is kind of tricky, but it works just the same as typing horizontally. Just erase it. Number of attendees. I can always move it if I have to. And you can add data labels, kind of like we did with the pie chart, except this one, it's a bit crowded. I think the data table accomplishes that a little bit better, personally. So that's why I added the table instead of the labels. All right, now, a couple more things I just want to go over, and then we'll be all set here for Excel 3. Okay, because again, the main idea here was is really to show you the elements that are available for different kinds of charts, but more importantly, kind of how to access those elements and then format them in a number of ways. All right, and as long as you kind of understand how that format pane works, you can apply that to any chart. Okay, your first category is the one that's specific to the element. Sometimes you'll get text options if it contains text. And if you see the graph icon, that means that that element contains data, and you can change the way the data is presented, or we'll just say presented. All right, and last but not least, remember that if an element is made up of more than one object, when you select one of those objects, it will select all of the objects in that element group, like our data labels here. If you want to isolate just one of them from the rest, just give it one more single click, and you will have only that one object selected. All right, now if you want to print, if a chart is selected, okay, it will only print that chart and leave out the worksheet. Okay, so if you want to try to print everything, it might be a little bit tricky, but remember, just click outside of the chart, and then it will grab the data and the chart. Okay, maybe if you change it to landscape, you'll likely have better luck getting everything onto the page. All right, so as you can see here, if I just take that column chart and move it underneath the pie chart, I can fit all of this onto the one side of this page. Okay, and then we've talked about printing options. We won't go over those again, but you can add your grid lines back to your data set. You can also center everything on the page by going to the margins tab. Is it margins tab? Let me just go to page setup real quick before I forget. Yes, the margins tab in your page setup. All right. And also, one more thing to remember is when you do the page setup options we've done in the other classes at the end, right? Setting up our grid lines, centering things, increasing the scaling, adding headers and footers especially. All right. The page setup options that you go through, those only apply to the one sheet that is selected. It will not apply to all the sheets in your workbook, okay? But if you go to File, Print, under Settings, change Print Active Sheet to Print Entire Workbook. All right, then go to Page Setup. Now it will affect all the sheets in your workbook. So if you add a header and footer, for example, it won't only add the header and footer to the one sheet, it will add it to all the sheets across the board. Okay, you can also, as we did before, just select all of your sheets ahead of time by selecting the tabs, go to Print, and you'll see it changes it to Print Entire Workbook. So you could do it either way, it doesn't really matter. or really you could do active sheets because either one would work, because active sheets in this case would grab all of them because they're all active. In fact, since I have just a few minutes, I'm going to get this set up for printing because this came out very nicely. So I may as well save my work or print my work. So I'm going to put this chart underneath this one. I'm going to go to File. I'm going to go to Print. I'm going to change this. Oops, see, I selected the chart. I forgot to unselect it. There we go. Print active sheet. And then I'm going to go down to Page Setup. Under Page, I've already changed it to Landscape. I might be able to increase the scaling, but I'm taking up a lot of space already. I'm going to leave that alone. I'll go to Margins. I'll center it horizontally, vertically. Perfect. Header and footer, I'll go to Custom Header. In the left section, I'll put in my first and last name. Center section, Excel 3 Practice. Right section, I'll input the date. Remember, the date is in this toolbar here. So I click on the date tool, I'll click OK. Now I have a header. And then I'll go to Custom Footer. I'll go to Center Section, input a page number. Insert a page number by going to this toolbar and clicking on the Insert Page Number command, clicking OK. And then I'll go to Sheet. Under Print, I'll add the grid lines. I'll click OK. And there we go. And I could move the charts over so they're centered better, but I think it's fine. Now I have everything on one sheet. I can print it out, and it's all set. And again, in this case, I didn't select the entire workbook, so all those changes I just made to page setup only apply to this one sheet. All right, so if you have any further questions about what we covered in Excel 3 today, you can direct them to the GoToMeeting chat. Otherwise, we are all set for this class, and we're set up for, now we're prepared for our final Excel class, Excel 4, next week. Remember, if you're all set, remember you can leave GoToMeeting, click on the X, and then select Leave Meeting. But I'm just going to go through a few closing remarks. But if you have to head out, that's fine. Just click on the X and then select Leave Meeting. All right, so thank you for coming. Our next Excel class will be Excel 4 next week, Thursday, February 24th at 2 p.m. Okay, and that class will talk about sorting and filtering. So we're going to talk about sorting and filtering your data by more than one column, and then we're going to use pivot tables to create dynamic views of important information. So basically, pivot tables are a better way to sort and filter your data. Remember that this class was recorded. It will be posted to our library's YouTube channel. Visit mcl.org, our library website, and in the upper left-hand corner, click on the YouTube icon. That will take you to our YouTube channel, and from there, go to Playlists and then select the Computer Instruction playlist. Remember, we have handouts for our classes. I mentioned this at the beginning. All right, so to get to those handouts, go to our website, mcl.org, click on Services from the main menu, and then select Technology Instruction. Once you're on the Technology Instruction page, just scroll down and you will see all the handouts listed by the name of the class. All right, from the Technology Instruction page, if you want to, from there, you can register for more classes. Just click on the Register button. There's one for in-person, one for online. It doesn't matter which one you click. They both take you to the same computer class calendar where you can scroll through and register for whatever classes interest you. And the March classes will be available soon, all right, early next week. So you can always, if you want to retake any classes, you're welcome to do that in March. And remember, we're offering our virtual private sessions on select Fridays. All right, during these sessions, we work with just you individually on a computer project you might need some help with. or in some cases, we can help you troubleshoot your tech device. All right, so if you want to sign up for one of these virtual private sessions, you'll see them in the same calendar. Click on the link for private sessions, and then follow the instructions to book your 20-minute appointment. Again, select Fridays between 10 and 2. If you have any further questions about our technology instruction program or about what we learned here today, you can send us an email to techclass@mcl.org. All right, if you have no further questions, again, you can go ahead and exit GoToMeeting, click on the X in the upper right-hand corner of the GoToMeeting window, and then click on Leave Meeting. If you are leaving, thanks so much for coming today. We hope to see you again in class very soon. Take care.